introduce Marguerite and Laurie Wiseman. They're very kindly offered to help teach nurses about things that are important when caring for families who are faced with end-of-life care in a hospital, and some of the decisions that are made at that time, and very generously said that they'll share their story of when their son Ben died. So thank you very much. I'll let you two tell the story.
Thank you. Ben was born at 900 grams, and he spent the first 3 months of his life in hospital. So he was very precious, and it was a great joy when we brought him home. We had quite a large extended family, and he was loved by everyone. And when he was five, we went to Malaysia. Laurie was in the army, and we were posted to Malaysia.
I was posted to Malaysia for 2 years on a project, and Ben was our only child, and he attended the international school in Kuala Lumpur, where he gained a really broad American accent because it was an American school, and he learned how to. He had an eating problem earlier on, but because we were in Asia and we're eating lovely Malaysian food, he learned very quickly how to eat rice and how to eat really nice Malaysian food. We came back to Australia in 1984, and just after that I got out of the army and we remained in Canberra. Ben went to one of the Catholic primary schools, and then he ended up going to Marist College here in Canberra, where he went through to year 12. After he left year 12,
he decided he'd like to be a nurse. So he went to Albury Wodonga, to Monash University, to La Trobe University at Albury Wodonga, which we thought had meaning because he was born in Albury Wodonga, and we felt going back there was a good thing for him. Well, after 2 years of partying and having a really good time, we brought him home and said, get a job. So he decided he would work in the aged care system, and he was a personal carer at a dementia unit in the mornings, and in the afternoons he was a personal carer in a nursing home. And he really had a knack with the old people. He loved working for them and with them, and he was very good at his job.
After he'd been doing this for about 9 months, he decided that it would be a really good idea if he went back to university. So he came to University of Canberra and started to do the pre enrolment course, which he was working through because he wanted to start going back to nursing again in 2002. This was. He continued to work in the aged care industry, and
just after he left school, he developed diabetes, epilepsy, and he was on medication for the seizures, but fortunately he would only have maybe 1 or 2 a year, and he was on the medication, but at this stage he was 23, and a lot of 23-year-olds don't take their medication. And he was staying at his girlfriend's house when he had a seizure in the bathroom, and they couldn't get into him, so he had been unconscious for about 10 minutes. When they did get into him, they resuscitated him and took him off to hospital. At this stage, Laurie and I were in Newcastle because it was Father's Day, and we had gone to see Laurie's father, and Ben's girlfriend rang to say that this had happened and could we come to the hospital. And we said, oh, of course we could. So we set off, and about an hour later she rang and said, where are you? And we said, we're on our way from Newcastle. Ben hadn't told her that we were in Newcastle, so she assumed we were only in Canberra. Anyway, we got there to be greeted with Ben unconscious, and the doctors were very, very helpful, and told us what had happened and what we could look forward to.
Ben was he was in a coma. He was on life support. They told us that he still had brain function, but they weren't sure to what capacity of brain function they had. So we stayed with him that night. That was the Sunday night, and at about midnight they told us that there was nothing. There wouldn't be any change, so we could go home. So we went home, and at 3 o'clock that morning we got a call from the hospital to say that there'd been a change, and they thought we should come in. So we went into the ICU, and we were told then that they'd done some more tests, and it looked like the prognosis was the worst it could possibly be. That is, that he was still had some brain function, but it was diminishing to the point where he would be brain dead.
So we sat with him, and we were in the waiting room, and there was a poster about organ donation. And so after numerous tests that 2 doctors carried out, they asked us if we would be able to donate Ben's organs.
Well,
we
actually asked if it would be possible.
And they said yes, and we were assigned a lovely organ donor coordinator who has become a very good friend, and she took us through the whole proceeding, told us what was going to happen, and then
we were informed the whole time as to what would go on, because of course we had very little idea of this. We'd discussed this with Ben over the years, discussed organ donation, but of course he didn't have a driver's licence, so he didn't have it on his driver's licence, but we'd had it on our driver's licences, and that's how we discussed it in the context of either Marguerite or I predeceasing him, and this would be our wish that if we could become organ donors. So after the medical people worked through what would happen, they then did the second test for end of life test at around about 4:30 in that afternoon, and then they asked us if they could move Ben into a room, and then he could have his family and friends come and visit. So that occurred around about 6 o'clock.
That was all. It was wonderful to see. We had a continual stream of relatives, friends, people that Ben worked with. His friends brought in his boombox, as they call it, and to this day, Red Hot Chili Peppers' Californication is very precious to us. And it was just wonderful. The young ones came in and they said, well, why isn't he dancing? He just looked so alive, I suppose. He was
Peaceful.
Just sleeping. And so everybody spent that time with him and said their goodbyes, which was really important, not only for us, but for them too, especially the young ones, because they really couldn't understand it and they wouldn't believe it. But it was great to see the number of people that came, and it was just wonderful. And also after that, one of the nurses were asked me if I would like to help her give Ben a wash, which I greatly appreciated.
That was and so just after that, the first transplant team arrived from Melbourne, and the doctor from Melbourne came in and talked to us and told us what he was going to do. He was the Melbourne transplant team were taking the heart to Melbourne, and the Sydney team came in not long after, and they were going to transplant the other organs. In the meantime, the organ coordinator donor coordinator. She was with us the whole time. She just sort of slipped away now and again to have a rest and then come back to us. But she then came and told us that she would accompany Ben through the whole of the journey of the operation to take the organs for transplant. And after that occurred, and then after that Ben was brought out of the operating theatre, and we were able to say our goodbyes to him then. And my parents had come down by then; they were there at this stage too. So it was really, really nice that we could do that.
And the whole time, the staff would tell us what was happening, what was going to happen, and you know, they couldn't have been kinder, more compassionate, and that's the most important thing, I think. The fact that everybody was so compassionate towards us.
One of the other things I'd like to add about the staff too was that whenever they were dealing with Ben, they were talking to him as though he was there, was able to understand it, and this occurred from the time that we first saw him in ICU, right through until he was taken away to the operating theatre. So I mean, he'd been declared brain dead, but the staff was still treating him as though he would have been able to understand, and that was, to us, that was just sort of amazing, and it was really good for us.
Can I just ask a couple of questions? I really appreciate. I can't believe how awful it would be to go through what you've been through, and can't imagine it. When you started going through that process, when you came to the hospital, what were some of the most really important things that the nurses could do for you when you first arrived at the hospital?
You mean when we first arrived at ICU?
Even when you first arrived, when you drove down from Newcastle and you parked the car and you came up to the hospital.
Yep.
What happened at that point? What were the important things?
We were told that he was in ICU, so we went to ICU, and we were taken into the waiting room. Sam, Ben's girlfriend, was there, and the doctor, the doctor came out and said, "Look, I just want to prepare you for the fact that when you go in there, Ben he'll have things down his throat, he'll have tubes hanging off him," and he sort of prepared us for what we were going to see. I mean, we'd been talking for 5 hours in the car as to what we would see, and that was pretty much what we thought, and we got that from. But we did get that from there, and then the nursing staff in the ICU, whenever they did anything, would explain to us and to Ben what they were doing, and that's really important, so that you know what's going on. There's not just people prodding and poking with you not having any idea.
For instance, they were doing some test, and they said to Ben, "Oh, you're not going to like this, Ben, but it has to be done." Well, you know, he probably didn't even feel it, but they were talking to him all the time, and it just made us feel better.
And of course, at this stage, there was an expectation that he could still recover, even though the doctors sort of were taking us to the point where they were saying this might not be good, but there was still that sort of feeling that there could be a good outcome from it.
So you felt it was very important to be able to be with Ben whenever you needed to, whenever you wanted to be, and as often as you could be?
Certainly.
Yes. It was really important to be there in case he woke up. And we had, our minister was there with us all the time, most of the time anyway, and he was continually praying with us, which was also extremely important for us.
And were you able to have your questions answered?
Yes, certainly. The young intern doctor was really good with the questions, and we also got lots of really good information from the nurses. The nurses were, I mean, they were much more open, I think, than the doctors, but they were, and they were, I'd have to say that I thought the nurses were probably a bit more honest about it, about, you know, when you ask what's the real prognosis here, they would tell you what they thought could happen, rather than try and be positive all the time. They would actually tell us the nitty-gritty of it.
Did you find that helpful?
Very much so, yeah.
It was just like they were preparing us, I suppose.
Yeah. But I mean, I would, from my point of view, I want to hear the truth as much as possible, and I want to hear it straight up. No, you don't have to embellish it for me.
Is there anything you would like to recommend that nurses think about when they're caring for families at a time like this? What would be the most important thing that you would like nurses to know?
To include the family. Include the family in what's going on, and to talk to the family and tell them what's going on, and just help them to accept what's happening. Another thing that one of the other staff did was, we had just before he was taken to the operating theatre, she said, "Would you like a photograph?" And she took a photograph of the three of us and cut a lock of his hair. You know, things like that. Make it easier, or something.
But I mean, the main thing is to tell people what they're doing, and what the reason for what they're doing. Like, they're checking the pulse, they're checking the reflexes, and this is how we do it, and this is why we're doing it. That's the key.
Is there anything else that you would like to say?
Well, I'd like to encourage everyone to ensure that if they are in this situation, that they do take advantage of it and allow their loved ones' organs to be used, to be donated, because it's a great comfort to you to know that life's gone for Ben, but life lives on for others. And in fact, there are still 3 people who have survived 11 years because of Ben.